Well, thank you everyone for having me today. An exciting topic and exciting to be with you in this space. As you heard from Jane, my background is about 17 years in fundraising. I started in a small national organization tied to the foreign missions in the Canadian Catholic Church. From there, went to the University of Toronto at the tail end of Canada's first $1 billion fundraising campaign to study some of the technical side of giving in a major gift segment. And after that piece was my dream job, 6 years with the Catholic Central Archdiocese of Toronto, supporting our 230 churches and 1.9 million Catholics. And from there was about 4 years with Scotiabank in a really unique role called Philanthropic Advisory Services, working with high net worth donors as they structured their giving plans. And now just about 3 years with the wonderful organization Canada Helps in its space in online giving. And that time in charitable giving and fundraising has led me from churches to working with donors to working with advisors. And this is really unpacking the learning from that space, moving from inside the church to outside to working with people in the pews. And in my current role, I'm crossing the country almost a dozen times a year, working with hundreds of churches across Canada and many primarily in the Anglican community. So there's a good number to unpack, and I've got 3 things I'm going to focus on today, specifically because this is the Trinity crowd, so I stick with 3. And it's really life-giving to be with you in this context of being on the faith community language, because this has been both a passion of mine, but also there's a lot of spaces in which we are being, and I will specifically say, deliberately excluded from the philanthropic conversation. I actually just got off a conference call where we're preparing for, in 2 weeks, a number of charities will participate in a day on the Hill in Ottawa, lobbying the government on what they want to see from the charitable sector. And there isn't a huge amount of faith representation, and thank goodness this organization, Imagine Canada, makes sure that everybody's at the table. But this is the challenge too. How do we find ourselves at that table, either from the donor side or from our institution side? So I'm specifically going to look at where we are now, give you some context on both the secular world of giving and what's happening in our churches and in our faith communities. Some trends of where things are going and what you will want to take advantage of, and things you should be aware of when you get back to your home communities, because they're the most important trends in charitable giving today. And then lastly, the importance of some practical ideas. Again, I've spent much of my career in church basements knowing there's not going to be extra budget, there's not going to be extra time or money. So most of my suggestions don't cost anything except for that investment of time and energy. And I'm sharing with you too what the payoff is. And very many times it is these large gifts, it is this deeper commitment with your congregants and donors. So where are we now? It's really interesting. We had a groundbreaking moment in December of 2016 when the Canada Revenue Agency produced one of its first infographics. It was a Star Trek moment for the Revenue Agency. And actually it's exciting because they've got some new leadership on the charity side, and they're pushing forward with some really exciting initiatives and being more transparent in the reporting. Now, it was interesting because I was watching late at night when they tweeted this, and then it kind of disappeared for a couple minutes because I think everybody freaked out a bit about what they saw. My background is being raised partly in the faith community, but also in the formal secular fundraising education community. And as much as they've been around for decades promoting all of this new types of giving and secular stuff, what do we find here from this infographic? Top 3 methods of fundraising and collection in Canada. Number 1, church collection plates. We can move as far as we want in the future, and yet that's still the number 1 method of charitable giving in this country. It's actually a bit of a message to this formal fundraising community that your methods are not moving forward. But it's also a reminder to us that there's a danger, that we know that baskets will not be the primary method of giving forever. And if we rely on them, we are going to be left behind. Because this is a space where primarily we're talking about just the one paradigm of tax-receipted giving. And actually, when we look at what generosity is doing, the formal tax-receipted giving is not just the biggest area of growth. There's a lot of other growth there as well. Number 2 being special events, and number 3 being non-donation revenue, often tied to payments, tuition, or other revenue-generating programs. When we look at a few decades of charitable giving in Canada, we actually see that donations are going up, but the number of donors are going down. This is what you probably see as well in your congregations, that as much as people are giving more on average in a lot of cases, the number of regular donors, and we've got a great report. I'm going to give you a PDF copy of this presentation, but actually all of my PowerPoints have 5 terrifying pages of links So that every single thing I mention, every report, every book, you're going to click on a web link and you can go right to it. But the revenue agency and StatsCan put together a report that's really a great read to understand this, what's happening with donors. And they talk about the danger and the need to focus on primary or core donors, as we call them. For us, it's about people who hold those season tickets in our pews, not the transactional, transitional donor who we're hearing about through crowdfunding and different methods who's coming and going. Right? We're doing more fundraising in our churches per se, but those aren't people who are necessarily staying with us. Now, why does this all matter? The only reason it matters is because we've got our regular offering that people make. We've got our one-time or lifetime capital gift that they might make in a campaign every 10 years or so. And then they've got the ultimate gift, which is also called the planned gift. And that gift in Canada is on average 1,000 times what they give annually. This is a really different space. When I was in a secular environment in a university, I used to get made fun of by a lot of my major giving fundraising peers to say, you know, Paul likes to hang out with the little old ladies. And I said, so yeah, Dougie, who drove the Cadillac up to the golf tournament, doesn't own the Cadillac. Bob and Judy, who've been staffing the front desk as head of the Alumni Association for 20 years, can buy and sell Bob 10 times over. They care about us more. They've been giving to us more. They spend time with us. When it comes time to our churches, they're in our pews 4 days a week, 5 days a week. If you just think about where they spend their time, if that correlates to giving, this is someone who's much more likely to give to you. If you are thinking, who should we be talking to, the wealthy donor or the person who is part of our family, you are more likely to get this type of lifetime gift from someone who's part of the family. Speaking of families, we call this our modern family, if you've seen these wonderful folks. And we heard several times this morning about how donors, and Canadians specifically, and of course you've got that expat tie-in and that stiff upper lip of people who don't like to talk about their giving. And that's absolutely true. This is one of the great Canadian challenges in the formal fundraising world. In the States, people love to be broadcasting what they're donating, and in Canada, we don't like to talk about that. And when I look at fundraisers who have done it well, especially in the faith community perspective, the number one thing they're doing is disconnecting how much they give versus why they give. Why is my faith community important to us? You heard this morning, preach to the need. And when people feel that connection to the need, when people feel like I'm going to do something, we need to have them talking about it. Turkey Day is coming up. This is the time where the patriarch needs to say, I just want you all to know, your mother and I are making this kind of gift, and this is why we believe it's important. How many people you like to yell things like, my great-grandfather laid the stone of this church and the first cemetery head? That's great. But we're going to read your obituary in about 2 years, and it's going to say all your money's going to a cat shelter. In my previous life, in working with these clients in a banking perspective, we used to say, I couldn't talk to somebody unless it's $1 million plus. I couldn't return a phone call for less than $250,000. And when you push a Canadian up against the wall, and frankly, most people make their will, most people decide everything they have on earth 2 weeks before they go on vacation. Number one time Canadians make a will. So if you put them up against the wall and say, make a decision, everything you are on earth is going somewhere, who's going to get it? And if they're really pressed, they usually yell out, cats. And you know this too. Animals don't talk back. Children talk back. Charities are difficult. Charitable causes are difficult. Canada is struggling with what does reconciliation mean right now. If you ask a Canadian if reconciliation means something to them, for the first time in history, they might say yes. But if you say to them, if you're going to make a charitable gift to do something about it, where will you give? Could they tell you? So this is the challenge a lot of them face. The good news, and we heard this morning in the panel discussion too, about people saying, well, I'm not even sure I want to make this gift. I've already made my will. Well, you have a great discussion you can have with them. You have a choice in Canada. We have the #1 charitable tax credit system in the Western world, and you get to make a choice. The government, your heirs, or a charity. Pick 2 of 3. So as long as you feel that the government is representing your particular charitable interests, is taking your tax dollars and sharing them in the social community, which is what they do. If you feel that that allocation matches your values, fine. But of course, the government doesn't really give to faith. Corporations don't really give to faith. They'll do everything in the world to get around connecting to faith communities, every disaster relief, every faith kind of connection in this country. And yet when there's a crisis, Vietnam refugees in the 70s, Syrian refugees in 2015, where do they turn? Oh, look, churches suddenly become important. This is a reminder to us that we're the backbone of how this social connectivity works, and you've just got to ask your donor, do you agree? If you don't, no problem. But ask yourself, where do you spend your time? Where do you spend your life? What is the share value of how your heart is divided? And for most people in their DNA, it starts with the church. That's a big point for us to remember. In fundraising, and I teach the course for the Canadian Association of Gift Planners on tax giving and the structure of planned giving, and people come to this course as fundraisers incredibly intimidated, worried that they're going to have to learn all of these tax calculations, and we really focus them on one question. Can you flip your structure of asking from what we need as a charity to what the donor wants to do with their charitable giving? Where do we fit in their life? From a pure strategic perspective, one of the sexiest things I've ever heard was done in the United Kingdom about 3 or 4 years ago, where a doctor of psychology stuck donors in an MRI machine and then read brochures to them. And then he saw what part of their brain lit up when he said bequest, estate, God, cats. And what was really important was the people who were making a planned gift, who were considering a bequest, the part of their brain that lit up was the part of the brain connected to biography. One of my greatest mentors is a man named Ken Ramsey, who was originally connected to the United Church. His spouse is actually now planned giving for the Presbyterian Church. And he often says, this really was a will and testament. We need to consider it and consider people rewriting it as a moral biography. It is a statement to your family of your values, whether you like it or not. This is, people take money very personally. I've got some great estate planning lawyers who remind us that equal is not the same. And so people do things like give the stocks to one kid, give the house to another kid, give the cottage to another kid, and then they let that will sit for 40 years, and the values are different. And then they die and the stocks have been liquidated, the cottage is worth more than the house, and all 3 kids say, this is how much mom loved me. And of course, when it comes to wills and estates and dividing up what you're worth, money isn't the only thing that of value. Right? People really, really struggle with this. And so when you have this conversation, and this is what Ken does these days, he leads something called the teaching of the empowerment dialogue about how we have these conversations with donors. For us, in preaching to the need, they need to understand that we're going to be here, and if we're not, their money is still going to get to where it needs to go. Donor advised funds, and I'm going to talk about them in a second, financial institutions are ever present. Community foundations are becoming more present in the lives of our donors. We've got organizations like Abundance Canada, formerly the Mennonite Foundation of Canada, talking to donors as if they're the Christian Foundation of Canada. Yet you've got the Anglican Foundation of Canada that can do this for donors. To say wherever your faith community evolves to, we can make sure your money goes there easily, efficiently, and you can trust us. But the other part of this also, besides what people often think of capable of giving, meaning financial, in our pews it is much more emotional. Most people don't really believe they're worth a lot. When I would go in one of my last talks, I do a lot of talks in public libraries, as I'm very passionate about libraries, and an older donor came up to me in the prairies and said, son, you should stop using the term high net worth. We're a bunch of seniors around here. We don't have a lot of money. I mean, I've only got about $500,000 in RSPs, and sure, my house is now worth $1 million, and in liquid I'm worth about $6 million, but it's not a lot of money. And it's this is what's happening. You see all over Canada, the housing prices are worth more. People are becoming the final inheritors. We are living in a time with the largest amount of Canadians with the least amount of children in the history of this country. Right now, there are over 18,000 Canadians over the age of 100. For the first time in Canadian history, there's more older people than younger people. That's not going to change. That's only going to go in the other direction. So when we talk to advisors about this, and this was the slide I would use in the bank to train them about what happens when people say, I don't have enough money for charity. Well, we can take care of our family, we can take care of the needs, but there will be this extra piece. And in a secular world, you'll hear more terms like social capital, social investment. You hear this language now transitioning, right? So that is a piece, and it's also a piece in this whole direction of moving to a secular language. And I'll talk in a little bit about how to remind the people who sit in our pews where we fit in a diagram like this. It's important. Then there's a whole other thing happening too, which is we exist in a time of disruption. We are no different than these kind of organizations who are getting disrupted. You think that the taxi industry and the hotel industry are bothered because this is changing the way their business is done? No, they're ticked off because this is taking revenue off their plates. And make no mistake, in the change in the physical, digital way that money transfers, we are losing money in our churches as well. If we don't keep up with this type of technology, with this type, all of this kind of the language and even the physicality. You know, when I go to churches all the time and I visit them, there's always a bake sale. Who carries cash right now? Can they even take that money? This is the piece, and it's not just fundraising and bake sales. It's everything down to ministry payments. It's everything down to how do we pay for the choir dinner and the Italian lasagna night? Who is coming into church with this much cash? Can they transact in this space? The crowdfunding sector is in the billions now. GoFundMe was acquired by PayPal for more than $10 billion. And we'll talk about how this affects it too. This is the danger that we find ourselves down here of too little too late. Just having a website for your church is not enough. It is time to take a look at it, see if it's efficient, if it's actually raising you money. What does the traffic look like? In 2016, Google said we will penalize any website that is not optimized for a mobile device. You will appear lower down on searches. This is why it's important to make sure that we update this both for our ministry, both for the way that we interact with people, and for the way that people come to give. So where are we going? Trends are important. You know, it's a quick story, but we don't tell it enough. A charity that I work with, Canada Helps, was actually born in a church pew. It was 3 computer engineers home for Christmas. They were at 2 different universities, Queen's and Waterloo, sitting in a church pew, looking at a basket going, there's got to be a better way to do that. They were 13 and 14 and 15 years old. And they went and they consulted a number of different organizations. They got some funding from funders and banks, and they got partnership with the Canada Revenue Agency so that as a charity, their purpose was to serve other charities, to provide that technology at no cost, get them access to the net. And now, after 17 years, we're working with 18,000 charities across Canada. And in their first year, they raised $100,000, and we have scaled now to over $145 million a year. But that's not the real story. The real story is reminding us. People think about this is coming, X is coming. Future's here now. It's just not evenly distributed. You know it. You know that the sick kids in the hospitals and the universities and the Oxfams who have Tap to Give, who have mobile giving, who have all this different stuff are outmaneuvering us as institutions. It's why we have to say, how do we bring the physical world of secularism into the space so that when people care about us, we are as equally accessible as all these other institutions. This is why it matters. If you want to read a little bit more on this subject, I'm only going to touch on it. I'll give you a link to the NGO Global Online Technology Report talking about how technologies use charities in 2017, and we have actually partnered to provide Canadian data for that report. But what is the real piece is the story of mobile technology. You know, in a Global Mail study at the beginning of 2017, they asked, if you left it at home, what would you go back for? Phone was above wallet, slightly behind small child. Phones are how we live, and in 2017, they're how we give. Now, I'll talk about some of the methods that are out there, but if there's one thing you focus on as time goes on, again, everything from ministry to the way people interact with this, what is the number one thing that people go to church websites for? It's hilarious, especially during Christmas and Easter. The number one thing they go to church websites for is what they've known for 1,000 years. What time's the service? What time's the 3 o'clock mass?
What time's the midnight mass?
Exactly. They go there looking for that kind of stuff, for bulletins, for the engagement piece. That's really important. And then after December 10th, they're going to give. That's a really important part to remember as well. Online is the fastest growing method of fundraising in Canada, and organizations who have a fully diversified revenue portfolio are bringing in 10% of their total revenue online. Are you? Have you reached that point, or is it again just the large organizations who have focused their time on this medium, who are bringing in these kind of funds in that space. It's really important to understand this piece, and mobile is the key to that. Again, is your site mobile? Is your giving area mobile? Again, this is what we're focused on at Canada Help, so that if you use us, you know you've got at least that piece. But the rest of it, how do they learn about giving? How do they engage with you in that space? How do they ask you questions? How do they find a person? The other large, quickly growing movement is the concept of peer-to-peer, person-to-person, and that crowdfunding is buried inside of that. We've got older numbers, so that in 2016, this is almost 1.4 billion in Canada. But only a few percentage points, only less than 30% is charitable. You know what the rest looks like, right? Tragedy in a city, people want to respond, they give a ton of money. If you've ever seen the bus bully video, the woman who was bullied as the bus driver on the video, and a nice young man said, let's send her on a vacation, I'll raise $5,000, it raised $700,000. She took the longest vacation in the world. She retired. But the public also attacked her and said, you should be making a foundation with that. You should be doing anti-bullying advocacy with that. And she's just like, I was bullied on a bus. And she didn't raise the money. She didn't even have the money yet. The public is always crying to us about accountability and transparency and overhead cost. Meanwhile, these crowdfunding sites take 10 to 15%. You don't really know who the donors are. They're not transparent. They're not accountable. You don't even know how that money gets to you because it's the donor who's collecting the dollars, not the institution, and there's no tax receipt. But they smartly have a button that says donate. This is confusing our donors, and we have to pay attention to why they're winning. And it's because they tell stories well, they use technology, primarily video, and they make sure the person can move from decision to donation very fast. That's a piece we really have to think about. When someone is inspired in a pew, can they move from decision to donation as fast as their heart wants them to go? Because if you leave it up to the head, you lose. Because a hospital can beat you when it comes to the head, can't beat you when it comes to the heart. Now, what does the ecosystem of charitable giving look like in your world and in the world? When it comes to your local church, you've got all the different things that interact with donors in the pews, the different appeals, the different things that connected them. You've got all of the Anglican organizations further out as we see different mission giving and connected to schools, etc. But then you've got also a lot of people who are wandering into your pews, right? You've got all these different types of foundations. You've got a ton of personal asks. I was looking at my own church this past weekend. There was a fair to do with knitting or something, and we're going to sell nativity scenes around Christmas, and we're going to give it to these 5 charities. None of them were connected to the diocese. None of them were connected to the church. One of them mildly contradicts our faith values. It's always going outside, and it's always whatever somebody feels like that week, and they don't think of us, and they don't think about how we do everything inside. And of course, we've got a lot of these other charities out there who are talking about the concept of faith, not necessarily spirituality. I like to say that Jesus went and chased all the goat sellers out of your lobby a few thousand years ago. Now, literally, World Vision is selling goats in your lobby. I can't be any more literal that they're back, and hopefully Jesus is ticked off, but in the meantime, it's up to us. You just got to say, who's in our lobby, who's in our pews, who's in our envelopes? Just got to ask these questions. You have every right to do so on your premises. But outside of your premises, outside of your church, you've got a lot of other people talking to your donors. These are all charities. Let me say that again. These are all charities.
Making a lot of money.
And you're making a lot, absolutely. And this was my last job. It was funny. I was complaining about these donor-advised funds. In the United States of America, Fidelity Investments is now the largest charity in the United States of America, has overtaken the United Way. And in Canada, all of these institutions have donor-advised funds, meaning a public foundation to which they engage with clients around charitable giving. Now, quite a number of them have people who are from the charitable sector, are faith-informed, feel comfortable reaching out to dioceses and churches when they're planning for their clients. And there's 1,000 more who aren't. There's a lot of other players, so these are just the main donor-advised funds. You've got other independent funds out there that are connected to other financial institutions or totally independent. You've got in the center Community Foundations of Canada, which is a growing movement, an important movement, and if you connect with them, a positive and supportive movement. So wherever you are in your community, you want to make sure that local community foundation knows your church, knows how to grant to your church, knows about what your charitable initiatives are. If you've got a campaign, they've got a campaign. If any of their fund holders are parts of your congregation, they've probably put a few $1 million in a fund. The donation's already been made. They've just got to break a piece off for you. It's a lot less painful than asking for money. It's much easier to say, we need you to grant that money. So again, I've got some more for you on that. But let's go to the core of what we're talking about. This is the core of funding. This is what we've looked like for many, many years in terms of how we get funding in churches. We've also grown to have more online giving, and I don't put it in there because we're the first to say. Again, Canada Helps, born in a pew, has grown over the past 17 years, but we know that online is not an or, it's an and. It will never replace the basket. It is all about the basket, envelopes, etc. And if we have come now to grow, if there was some sort of an ideal, it looks more like that. We need to grow pre-authorized giving as the primary method. Online will still be there, but it will be about Christmas and Easter and extraordinary gifts. It's really about when the office is closed. It's really about someone who primarily gives in that space and is inspired, but it will not replace the basket. The other part as well, we've got to realize that transactions are as much revenue as they are donations. And can we transact for the purchase of tickets, for different types of payments? Can we do that as well? Because nobody's going to the office with cash, and the office is open usually when people are working. And of course, the other piece, and I was just talking to several different diocesan teams about this, the number one stumbling block to technology is that this will never go away. This will never not be important. You know the number one question of someone who is going to give online? I actually helped someone last night to donate stocks and securities to a church in the prairies, and this person who gave 5 figures asked me the classic question: what do I put in the basket now? Because you know Sheila's going to give me the stink eye if she doesn't see me put something in the basket. Plus the grandchildren are visiting. I got to put something in the basket, an apple core or something. The people who have moved forward closer to this ideal, to give people the confidence to go to pre-authorized, the confidence to try other methods of giving like securities or online, are the people, and this is an interesting one, this is where again, much like narrative budgeting, the Anglican community is forefront of this, is what I like to call stewardship tokens. You've got somebody knitting an item, you've got an older person who likes to do woodworking, making something, a physical token that sits at the back of the church in a basket that people pick up when they come in, and if they don't have envelopes for that particular basket service, they're putting it in the basket. Now, when I say this to congregations, the number one question I get from people is, but what if they didn't give, and then they took the token, and they put the token? You have more problems than I can help you with. If you don't have that faith trust element, they could have been taking envelopes and putting them in empty otherwise. Ask the Holy Rollers. They're the ones getting pennies in envelopes. They know.
And also, you don't have to put everything in pre-authorized giving. You're still allowed to put a 5 every time you go to church, right?
Right. The comment is, and actually, I'm on pre-authorized giving at my local church. They were smart enough to give me envelopes. And when something good happens, again, this is one of the things we got to remember. We employ the best fundraiser there is out there, the Spirit. So when good things happen, the Spirit says, hey, come on now. And I'm on pre-authorized giving, and I'm not going to go through all the rigmarole, pre-authorized giving. Still such a big barrier to set up. It is the only reason anybody ever keeps checks is to give you a void check. Pre-authorized, that's the challenge. It's why we've hit a wall with pre-authorized. I travel this country and visit hundreds of churches, and the first thing I ask them in the door, even if the place is on fire, what's your pre-authorized numbers look like? And I always hear, we're doing good, we've hit a wall. And it's because there's a big physical barrier. There's no easy way to remind them it's time to increase, unless you're doing the letters with the tax receipts, and less than 1% of churches do letters with tax receipts. This whole country in January with the window envelopes, and look, we're not going to send them to you. They're at the church. Go pick them up over there. And if I talk to the office staff to say we should be writing letters and thanking them and engaging them, that's going to cost extra paper. and yet we're going to go and do a capital campaign and ruin the social fabric of our church for the next 10 years if we do it wrong. And thanking and stewarding and engaging is the best way pre-campaign for this. I want to tell you 3 quick stories of this connected to how we fundraise in this space, and it's social. And I told you before, every church I go to on a Sunday as I wander this country, I'll slap down $20. I do the same thing at libraries. I'll slap down $20 and say, okay, I want the muffin. I want a tax receipt for $19.75. Usually the older person swears at me. How dare you? What do you think we're doing here? It says fundraiser. How much in debt are you? I don't know, $400,000? This is a quarter. You need the money. Take the money, I want a receipt. We're going to have to open up an account for you. You don't even go here. And I said, yeah, you're right, I'm from another province. Oh my goodness, and you want a tax receipt? The gall of this guy. Take your muffin and go. And they really don't. It's not a joke. They don't take the money. This is one of the big things about fundraisers. They're fundraisers. People want to have a good time. Nothing wrong with that. But we need to say to them, here's the method for people to donate. If somebody actually wants to talk about what we're doing here and why they're giving, and if they want to give anything more, they can do it here. And now with the way that online works, again, with Canada Helps now, every phone is a donation device. You don't need a payment machine. You got a phone or a tablet. It's processing gifts, everything, PayPal, debit, all of it, instant tax receipt. And the other one, of course, is the pancake side. When I was younger, before I had kids, I ran an Out of the Cold in downtown Toronto, a program for the homeless, and our main fundraiser was a pancake breakfast that had run for 29 years straight. It's now losing money. It's our main fundraiser. We're losing money on our main fundraiser. So as a 21-year-old, I come in, and of course, I'm a fundraiser at U of T and thinks he knows everything. I canceled the pancake breakfast. I got death threats. Canceling the 30-year running pancake breakfast? The voicemails. And of course, we realized this is the social element. It wasn't about the money. We put the pancake breakfast back on, and then we did one ask from the pulpit and one bulletin insert a year. If you believe in what we're doing, here's how we do it. Here's how we're going to do it. If you agree, give. If you don't, please don't. And we put it right out there. When I was running this program, I told them, we're going to do this faith. This is not a city program. No hairnets. There's going to be nuts and gluten everywhere. We're not going to Metro anymore. We're going to go to Costco. We may feed them caviar because these are our brothers and sisters. We're not giving them leftovers. And we said that straight up. And the program is running around $35,000 a year. I got $75,000 a year. By the time I was done, we were up to $100,000. We doubled our output in helping people. And we had one parishioner who gave me a credit card that says, this has no limit. You do whatever you want. I heard that credit card, that caviar thing. You feed that to them. My husband is gone. We didn't have an opportunity to give. We want to do something that has an impact. We see these people all over. I don't know how to interact with them. And of course, wonderfully, then we said, as a parish, let's talk about ministry. Let's talk about a real gift. And that unlimited credit card turned into a 7-figure gift. This is the amazing part of what's going on. That's possibility. Let's talk about absolute guaranteed eventuality. Every church office in this country closes on Christmas Eve and opens up on January 2nd. The baby Jesus found room at the inn. There's no room for the money. Every church office opens up on January 2nd with cash pushed under the door. We had 6 churches 2 years ago where we pioneered, where we emailed them a poster that they printed up and put on the door that said, office closed, here's a link to give. 2 of those churches raised $60,000. We even asked them, what is going on? You're not even that big a church. But it was about people feeling the Spirit at that time of year. A lot of it was smaller giving, but those 1 or 2 big gifts at that time of the year, that's what happens in all of the other big charities. We have left ourselves closed at the time where we exist tied to our mission. This is a really strong piece. This is guaranteed to happen. If you do one thing after this, it's making sure you get in the bulletin and you get on the parish office door in that Christmas season. Yes, the office is closed. If you would like to give right now. I love going to those churches that put that poster up because I watch people stand in front of the door and literally do it. This is a really big piece. It's important to remember. Big charities can fight us when we go out of that door. Inside that door, it's family, It's faith. We're untouchable. This is who we are. This is who they are. Everywhere else, we don't get to have that conversation. Inside, it's who they are. It's their whole life. When we look at creating those gifts, and I used to ask them, why is this happening? It was always a story of faith and ministry, of family. This happened. This was empowered. This was possible in my life because of the church. I want to say thanks. 2 reasons why people live big gifts is to say 2 words, please or thank you. Please do this. Thank you for doing that. If you dig deep in their history, you talk to donors, please and thank you will find you in that space. You know, when we look at the ecosystem of why people give to churches, how people give to churches, I was talking to a diocese about what the local giver looks like. And my local pastor got really mad at me because he said, they should just be giving here. We don't have that choice. There may be a football game. You go to the prairies, they move services depending on when the Rough Riders are playing. So they've got different churches that they go to. They've got the main church. Sacramental road trips, one of the grandkids is getting baptized, we're going over there. And so they give in these different spaces. They're registered in these different churches in different ways. Both their annual giving and their special giving will be connected to this. When I first started at Canada Helps, it was around 11 o'clock on a Sunday, and we saw around $10,000 come through a phone at a church. And I called up that donor and said, I just got to ask, what happened? He was a very irreverent young man. He was an entrepreneur who had his own private wealth. He was around 40, and he said, you know, we've been dunking babies at this church for 3 generations. And I'm at this baptism, and I see that there's a big campaign on, and I realize my family is cheap. And my mom's probably going to give $100 at a church they've come to for generations. I've been blessed. I've made this money. I'm watching this sacrament and realizing it's who I am. And he even said, you know, it's not who I am right now. Haven't been to a church in a little while, had a personal experience. I saw it in the bulletin that I could do it. I went right there on the phone, and I gave that money. It sounds like it's not happening, but we exist to represent small charities. 18,000 of them is our connection, and we are raising $250,000 cash a day. We are doing donations of $1,000 and $5,000 to churches a day, and especially on Sundays when people are hit with the right kind of message, with the right kind of experience tied to their ministries. This is where narrative budgeting is really strong. They're responding. We talk a lot about diversity and ethnicity and things changing in Canada. And make no mistake, many new Canadians come from continents where there is no desktop internet. It's been on phones for a generation. You go to Africa or Asia, people will say to you, what is a desktop? I've been buying sandwiches from a vending machine from my phone since the 90s. And I come to your church and you tell me things like, I've got to bring you cash. What are you, a drug dealer? Are you holding something hostage? It's really interesting to hear some of these people from the different communities talk about the concept of cash giving when they've been transacting, not just online, but through phones for decades. But the only one that matters to us is the change in the demographics of what's happening with age. Because actually, the civics, 80 plus, not 65 plus, the silent generation, the post-war generation are making bequests, but the real current generation are the boomers. And the challenge with the boomers is they've been taught to give, and they put things in baskets. You see the $5 envelopes. But the challenge is now it's time to talk to them about giving assets. Most Canadians over the age of 60 hold their money not in cash, but in assets, and we keep asking for money from the smallest pocket. It used to depress me when I was in a bank and working with clients who would say, I've got to give more to my church. It's going to come out of my grocery budget. I had this advisor, he was yelling at this client, and he was saying, for Pete's sake, Mabel, you live on $35,000 a year. You're worth $6 million. You took the bus here. And she said, you know, I hope one day to take a cruise. He goes, we're going to buy you a boat. And of course, the pesky thing about her was she was a Christian, and she was stuck in that way. No, it's all going to charities. Great, here's the charity guy. Who? I don't want to talk about it. It was like an Abbott and Costello routine. Just going around the room, giving to charity. Who? I don't want to talk about it. Because she was emotionally paralyzed. Because we were talking about $6 million more money than she'd ever talked about. Everywhere she gives, church, community, etc., it's always $100. It's usually a check. And you're saying, let's start doing it now in life. Let's give $100,000. What? I made those kids. I wouldn't give them $100,000. And so there's the structure, strategy. For her, it was about taking out the numbers, separating what she cared about in her life, what were the institutions, and breaking it up into shares. That was important for her. But we really have to reteach how. They know why. They're connected to us, but they need to know how. The next step is the younger generation. Millennials, who we like to make a lot of fun of, are pushing 40. Gen Z is in their 20s now. The millennials are quickly becoming and are now the main income-bearing generation of Canada. Maybe they're coming, but we actually haven't taught them the basics of giving. Nobody's taught them. Does the government of Canada tell you anything about tax credits unless it's time to do your taxes? There's no education in this country on that. And so they don't know how to give, and so what do they turn to? They turn to whatever hits them where they live. Where do they live? They live on this thing. And so they're crowdfunding, they're texting to give and all that, and they don't understand what a tax receipt means, how to use it, how to give in the church. We tell them, if you want to give, the most efficient way is pre-authorized giving. Give us a check, a void check, and then and they go, I'm sorry, you lost me. What was that word you just used? It's like saying toque to an American. So this is the piece. They're the generation that has to learn why. Why do we give this way? What does tithing mean? The stewardship side of things, they're the ones we got to push. All our stewardship activities are aimed at people with gray hair. They know it. They come for the tea. This is what we've got to really learn, and as well, learn some of the new technology. We've got to start listening in that environment. Yes, using those things, not just to talk, but to listen. This is the part I was talking about, that we just think that it's all about philanthropists. I thought that I was going to be working with famous people when I was at the bank. It was all little older couples. Not this little older couple. But regular, everyday Canadians, and those are the ones that are freaked out. Those are the ones taking the bus to the meeting. And when we look at what the advisors are doing, this is where we need to help. You can multiply your staff without having to pay them if you activate the advisors in your community, especially the ones connected to faith. The best insurance professional is the one who doesn't tell you they sell insurance, who comes every week, who's active in the church, who participates, but doesn't want to connect that to their life. We've got them on Sunday. We need to activate them from Monday to Friday, because all of this happens in the lives of our donors, and we can't help them with this. We're not talking to them about this. You can't close one of these gifts without a licensed professional. The best estates are made by an estate lawyer, not your brother-in-law who does real estate. The best insurance is done by licensed professionals who understand how to talk about it, not just how you do it, but why you do it. How we get around the will, how do we make it possible, how do we preserve anonymity? And then, of course, on the living side, currently, a lot of donors want to give more. They don't understand current taxes. Using things like stocks and securities, they could give more today without giving more. They could give more just by changing how they give, not how much. Their tax advisor is the one who can help them with this. And as I finish up, this is the important piece. And again, you're going to get the presentation. As you reread it, this is the part where we need to transition. This is a place where you absolutely lead in this country with narrative budgeting. When donors came to us in the bank, they would even say, I know why. It was very interesting because they didn't trust the institution, or they would come to us because they wanted that money to continue. They wanted a third-party steward of it. But if you continue to leave on the narrative side of financials, you will win. If you keep preaching to the need and how and why you will exist, you will get their funds long-term. If you want to increase their giving every year, you've got to talk to them about it and ask them, even in a passive way, ask them, but impact is the way that'll happen. If you want the larger dollars as you raise campaigns, as you engage them at special events, you need to help them move from decision to donation as fast as possible. Sometimes it's what they're holding in their hand to do it. And then lastly, if you want those planned gifts, you don't have to necessarily bring on new teams. I personally believe that dioceses do have to have planned giving staff to engage those donors, but every church can't do that. And around you, guaranteed, you've got probably 1,000 advisors. And you can activate them by saying, we are a charity, your clients are giving to charity, your clients sit in our pews on Sunday. When they come to you on money to make a will, just look backwards through their tax receipts and say, I see you give to a church. You've bought season tickets, but they're not in the will. Whenever we used to say that as a banker, people would do this thing. You remember the V8 commercials in the 80s? Oh, I could have had a V8. They do that with churches. Oh my goodness, the church. Well, you're there 5 days a week. You came from there. and they forget. You also need to learn how to tell the narrative story of your taxes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the ugliest website in Canada. The Canada Revenue Agency T3010 Charitable Tax Return Review. And this is where investor-minded donors go. Donors of the heart go to your website. Donors of the head come here because they want to see your pie chart. This is you, as a charity, naked. As one of my favorite data scientists likes to say, data renders us all naked, and if you're going to be naked, you might as well be buff. So can you tell the narrative story of your pie chart? Why do we operate this way? How do we operate this way? It doesn't happen well if you do the classic, here's how we spent the money. It works better into here's how we're going to, and here's why we spent it this way. Donors understand how that works. How do you get out in front of it? Just adjust to this new language of impact. Because annual reports are table stakes now. Impact is the way this is going to happen. We hope that we can help as Canada Helps. Every charity in Canada is on our site. We are more searchable and Google optimized than the CRA website, and we have launched an impact page for every charity in this country. Right now, your church has one of these pages. We've pulled in all of the Canada Revenue Agency data so that the donors can see, here's how you do what you do, here's the impact it has, but here is the pure numbers. This is what we are happy to say is driving more major donations, more planned and legacy gifts. It's why securities donors come learn about you on our site and then make that gift of securities. It is a huge increase in Anglican churches across Canada. If you want to do something after this session, again, this one costs nothing but time. You've got to break down the journey of your donor. This is an operational process. Get in a boardroom, get in a room with Post-it notes and say, from the pew, from the basket, from the special event, from the choir dinner, how do they give? How does it get to the office? How do we receipt them? How do we thank them? Follow them down that journey, and you will find the leaky buckets. The number one most important, though, and it's funny because in the secular world, they use the word stewardship to mean thanking. I'm going to be more specific here in a faith context to say the number one way to ask is actually to thank. If you want more, the number one way to get it outside of asking, and of course, Canadians were slightly passive-aggressive. I did work in a unionized environment at university. I like to say I have a sommelier in passive aggression. And as a Christian, a terminal Christian, as I describe myself, this is it. Thank you notes with tax receipts. This is how we spent the money. This is what we will do. We are grateful for it. And at the start of the year, you've got to use the most important piece of technology that you have to say, everything is increasing at this time. If you would like to increase pre-authorized, if you would like to learn about securities, etc., you've got to use the most important piece of technology in the history of the Christian world, church bulletins. We can have text to give, we can have thought processes, forget about it. Church bulletins. You don't think church bulletins are engaging? Try making a spelling mistake. You're going to hear about it Monday morning. Church bulletins are read, and increasingly they're read online. If you want to do something cutting edge, get your bulletin online. Get it online on Sunday, not on Thursday. This is the way they engage. This is the way they give. Fascinating as much in the bank, and even now as Canada Helps, when we have donors who are trying to give, and we tell them, you don't need us. Yes, there's fees. It's 3.5% to be transparent and clear. But why are they doing it? Because they can't find a person. I like to call this picture, we're here to serve you. Because they can't find us. How do you talk to a human being at a church? Info at emails, front desk phone numbers, titles that people don't understand, stewardship minister of the what, who do I give the money to? I have one church, I love them, they have a picture of the finance officer who's got like a basket. We just need to help them to understand if they want to give, how do they do it? Today, in check, campaign, online, all of it, smooth, decision to donation. Because our technology is scarily out of date. This is the first USB key. If this is the technology you're using, I can't help you. If you have a floppy disk on your computer, you're not going to make it. We have got to invest in the new technology, start using it, start testing it, start playing with it before those big secular charities spend the money and leapfrog us. And the other thing we got to do is actually stop. Stop chasing all these fads and trends. Today officially it's called Mean Girls Day. Has anybody seen this movie, Mean Girls? This is a Gen XY thing. But a lot of them talk about what is not going to work in fads and trends. And let me tell you, everybody wants text to give to work. It sounds exciting. It sounds possible and easy. Do you have phone numbers for your congregants? We don't even know some people's last names in our database. And you're trying to be doing satellite text to give. And this is our challenge too. Again, we're a charity. These are our for-profit competitors. They're great salespeople. I know they're calling you every half an hour. They want it to work. And again, we're not saying don't try it. It's another channel, absolutely. But it's about keeping things practical, evolving the basket to where it needs to go. And all these fads and trends are for disaster relief, secular charities, concerts and things like that. That's where text really works. It's all about keeping it really simple for them. Evolving past the pre-authorized, past the online, whatever it is they want to do to make it easy. Because this is a bunch of noise. Social media, everybody tells you got to get into social media. There's only two things I know for sure about social media. Facebook is the best place to watch your friends from high school get fatter. LinkedIn is the best place to watch your friends from university get richer. And when people ask me, where do I want to be to talk to donors, maybe Facebook's not the answer. But you can't do all of them. You can't be on everything. You can't be Snapchatting sermons. You got to pick one or two, and you got to focus. That's an important part. But if you move into that space again, making it easy, evolving whatever it is you do. Canada Helps, we had a 300% increase in securities gifts last year. And why? Because we simply evolved past that paper. In fact, if you give to a university, hospital, large charity in Canada, you still got to use a fax machine. You want to see something funny? On December 28th, go to any Staples Business Depot. You'll see wealthy people giving donations to charities because they got to fax that stocks form, and they're all trying to get it in before the 31st. What does a fax machine do? It takes a picture and it sends it electronically. Are we all walking around with a device that does that? All we have to do is talk to people. Everything, even the forms that we need. Even our ministry sign-up forms. Take a picture, email it to us. Instead, we're telling them to fax it. Nobody can read what's coming out of that machine. Why do we even have it anymore? This is a place, again, we can help if you don't have the help. If you have a broker, think about evolving to that place. And if it can help as well, we have a full education course that we built, a 6-hour college-level course. We got sponsored and subsidized so that it's less than $50 for a 6-hour course you can do over 3 months. What is Google Analytics? What is all of these different types of giving? How do we raise money online? We've got that in the course. For those of you who want to go deeper into planned giving, your stewardship team at the national office has an incredible site, but the Canadian Association of Gift Planners has been the source for the past 25 years. This book is now only $100, and if you're a member of the association, it's free with your membership, and it's updated for tax and strategy every 18 months. They have tweets to encourage bequest giving. The whole thing is in there. When I talk about advisors, people ask me at lunch, what does that mean? It's not just a lawyer. For stocks, it's a broker. For insurance, it's an insurance provider. You've got to be connecting with all these different types of one, and yes, the new philanthropic advisor. How do you do that? One document. It's free. The association made it. It's literally called the Philanthropic Conversation. So if a lawyer contacts you, cut and paste from this PDF, send it off to them. Here's what you need. And if you bring them in and you want to educate them on how to engage with your organization, another cut and paste PDF document of how to teach and talk to advisors about charitable giving. And then lastly as well, we've got some resources that are out there, some interesting reads about faith and giving. Our colleagues at M&M have another book today, a really exciting read. You've got this in your kits. Wow, what an exciting read. I did not sleep well last night reading this book. This is the kind of exciting stuff that will actually bridge the gap. When we talk about preaching to the need, when we talk about making it easy, coming from a biblical, theological, conversational place, this is it. This is how you do that, and look to integrate that in how you do it. Use the resources that have been given to you by the organization. I asked the team when I got here, I said, last week I was on the site, it's completely different. They've got a whole new resource site. We do so much looking out there for secular and outside resources, kind of get links to XYZ. You've got it. You've got it all there. Use it. The team has made it. It's exciting stuff. So I hope it's been of help this afternoon. Thank you for having me today, and good luck in your wonderful work in it.